I'm Dr. Mark Hatala, and I want to welcome you to our discussion of avoiding plagiarism. So, saying what we want to say, but not using someone else's words to do it. I think plagiarism is something that we all would like to avoid. So, hey, buy my books. And so I have 3 books on 7th edition APA style, which will help you improve your writing and also avoid plagiarism. How do we detect plagiarism? Well, like everything else, there's a technological solution to this too. So many of your professors are going to use turnitin.com or SafeAssign. Now, SafeAssign is through Blackboard, which is a learning management system. And so maybe your professor uses that. Maybe they use turnitin.com. What these programs do is they compare your paper not just to every journal article in their database, but to every website and also to every paper ever submitted to the service. And so we'll talk about that in a minute too. Papers are assigned a score based on how much appears elsewhere. And so what your professor gets is a report that highlights material that's appeared elsewhere and the source of the highlighted material. And so it gives you the reference of where that's coming from. And so reference sections and direct quotes get flagged by both programs because if anyone has also cited the article, it's in the database. And so oftentimes, like the entire reference page gets flagged because other people have used that same reference. And so it's not like that score means that you plagiarized. And it also knows all of the websites that you've used too. Now, you'd be shocked at how often Wikipedia comes up, where people just copy stuff from Wikipedia. And I once had a student who his paper on SafeAssign, it looked like it was lit up like a Christmas tree because he had pretty much plagiarized the entire paper except for like transitions from cracked.com in a college paper. It's pretty amazing. What about self-plagiarism? Because papers submitted become part of this database, you could get flagged for rewriting one of your own papers. So for example, and that's me there to the right, probably you reusing another paper. How much of your own work can you use? That's up to your professor. But this would be a situation like, let's say you write a paper on memory for a gen psych class. And then later you take a cognitive psych class and you're like, well, I like that paper I wrote on memory. I will use it as the basis for the paper in my cognitive class. You would get flagged for that. So how much of your own work can you reuse? It really depends on your professor. But if you're caught using your own work in a different class, I would say that you should just claim that you have the right to use your own writing under the doctrine of fair use. And that would probably make your professor say, this person knows their legal rights. Oftentimes, though, your professors don't need any kind of computer program in order to detect plagiarism. So things like the voice of the paper changes, or the student uses words and phrases that are clearly not theirs. And I want to give you an example, because students oftentimes think that they don't think they've plagiarized if they include a reference at the end of the paper or at the end of the paragraph. And this is from early in my career. I had a student in my cognitive psychology class. He just literally copied a page out of the textbook and then put a citation at the end. And I thought that was so egregious that I actually reported it to my dean at the time. And so we had a meeting with the student, and the student was like, well, could I just maybe take a class? I don't want to get in trouble over this because plagiarism is kind of a big deal. And the administrator, they all see themselves as King Solomon. They said, well, I don't want to sentence you to a class. Let's just have you rewrite the paper and not do that again. Making it a teachable moment in theory. Of course, the reality is it was a private school, and so they need that tuition money. So the student's not going to get in any kind of trouble for that. That's why I teach at a state school now. You can't plagiarize here. Let's talk about famous plagiarizers too. So T.S. Eliot, who you may have heard of, he's a famous poet. They took his poems and incorporated them into the musical Cats, and he won a Nobel Prize in Literature in 1948. But he constantly plagiarized the work of others. And he published a book called The Wasteland in 1922. And basically what he did was he took a number of lines from other poets and just rewrote them and without attribution and just included them in his paper. So he said, this is a quote from him, he said, "Immature poets imitate, mature poets steal. Bad poets deface what they take, and good poets make it into something better, or at least something different." You can Google other famous plagiarizers, but for famous people, a lot of times what happens is they took notes from the original sources and then wrote their works based upon their notes. And so they just copied from their notes verbatim. And so it wasn't intentional plagiarism. In my experience, in the vast majority of cases, people aren't intentionally plagiarizing. The guy who just copied a page from the textbook, he was intentionally plagiarizing them. Let's give a student example. So this was a D paper that had a number of other problems, starting with the misspelling of the name of the author that they plagiarized. But we won't pick on them too much for that. There's the original reference from the Natarajan study, The Halo Effect in Trust. Now, a general rule is you're plagiarizing if you use 5 words or more in a row from the original source without a direct quote or an attribution. Okay, so keeping that in mind. So here's the original source. "A principal may trust an agent due to the latter's ability to carry out the task as desired, competence trust, or to the perception that the latter will not act in a manner detrimental to the relationship of the former, goodwill trust." Now, granted, this source material is not the clearest writing, but we're also taking it out of context. And so let's just use this as our example. So here's what the student wrote. "A study by R.C. Natarajan," which misspells their name, they left out an A, and they included their initials, which you don't do in a narrative citation, "demonstrates how," and then you can read the rest of it, but 38 of the 50 words in that sentence are plagiarized, used just the same words in a row. Now, this could be rewritten. You don't have to plagiarize. You can paraphrase. And so this is how I would rewrite this. "A study by Natarajan, 2009, demonstrates how a person might trust another person by either their ability to complete a task, called competence trust, or their actions in building a relationship, called goodwill trust." And so basically, the citation is correct. The author's name is correctly spelled. We don't put their initials into it. The initial or original writing has been put through a de-jargoning machine, and I think this is a much clearer example. Now, you might wonder what happened to the student who got the D. Well, I went over the paper with them because I wanted to say that I got them kicked out of the university and they've had a miserable life ever since, but that's not the truth. I want my students to improve their writing. I don't know that the student realized that they were plagiarizing. So, in conclusion, plagiarism is easily detected through technology. Even famous people have been caught plagiarizing, and it's easily avoided by either paraphrasing, like in the example previously, or using a direct quote. Just make sure that you cite it. Now, in other videos I talk about, a lot of papers are just a bunch of direct quotes strung together, and that's not going to be a good paper either. But sometimes the way something is written, that is the best way to avoid plagiarizing. So I want to thank you for watching this video, wish you good luck with your writing, and ask you to come visit us at APA Central. I've made a lot of videos. There's a lot of other materials that are available to help you improve your writing, and have a great day.